Everything old is new again. America's entertainment pop culture talk show.
It may well possess a rudimentary intelligence.
I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Felt a great disturbance in the force.
Hello, I'm Mr. Red.
Come on, bark like a dog for me.
Where's the goodies? Leave the gun. Take the cannoli.
I bet you wouldn't have done anything like this if Mom and Dad were here.
You filthy criminal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Here are your hosts, Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Welcome to the bright new world of ABC. You'd never know they were cops unless you broke the law.
I mean, who are we supposed to trust? Same people we always trust. Us.
Starsky. Hutch.
I'm Starsky. He's Hutch.
Welcome to a bright new world this fall on ABC.
I can't wait.
We are. This is Douglas Viviani of Everything Old is New Again. I can't wait either. We're here, sans David Cohen, our usual co-host, but in his place, we're joined by a very special guest that will be sure to make you feel like our missing person, David Cohen, of course, is not missing at all. See, from 1975 through 1979, Paul Michael Glaser portrayed David Starsky, that's the dark-haired detective in Starsky and Hutch, and even directed a number of the show's episodes. Under the radio call sign Zebra 3, they were known for usually tearing around the streets of the fictional Bay City, California. We'll talk about that. And they tore up the rating books for 4 years. After that, he during that show, I guess you might remember this, he set a fashion world on fire with his signature cardigan sweater and left the red Ford Grand Tornado, if you remember that, Torino, with the white stripe. He left that behind, and he went on to direct a number of television shows, major motion pictures, including Running Man, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Most recently, he's turned his attention to the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, creating all forms of art and a book of art, pictures, and poetry called The Edge of Whimsy. Welcome to Everything Old is New Again, Paul Michael Glaser.
Well, thank you.
Now that we've had such a long introduction, we've got about 3 minutes left. I'm kidding, but you've done so much, and we're so excited and interested to have you on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Now, last we heard, we'll start just talking a little bit, just to catch everybody up here on Everything Old is New Again. We like to shine the flashlight, if you will, or shine the spotlight on things of the past and show how they have relevance and foundation to what we're seeing in entertainment today. And the last we heard of Detective Starsky on the TV show was the final episode called Sweet Revenge, where Starsky was fighting for his life after being shot on duty. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, did the producers want to kill off your character in the original show at the end there, or did they want to preserve the right to bring you back? Where did we leave off on Starsky and Hutch at the end?
Well, I directed that last episode,
yes.
And in the beginning, when Starsky gets shot with a machine gun, I had them put 5 or 6 loads in the back of my jacket so that he was shot in the back 6 times.
Right.
My intention was to kill him off, but the network and the producer says that's not possible. so I had to chuckle, and we stuck Starsky in the hospital and like that.
But at that point in time, had you known that that was going to be the last episode of the run of the show?
Yes, we were contracted to do 5 years. We didn't have what I would call a very comfortable relationship with the producers and with the network, because their attitude was, if you do 2 good shows out of 23, you're lucky. And my attitude was, if you do 2 bad shows, that's the way the cookie crumbles. So we were always fighting for more quality in the writing and in the and more responsibility in the depiction of violence. And
that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But speaking of chemistry and getting along behind the scenes, let's just talk for a moment about David Soul, who played Hutch. Do you attribute a lot of the success of the show to the chemistry on and off screen between you two, or do you feel that it was something else or a combination of other things that led to the success of the show?
Well, I think that our chemistry definitely had something to do with it. That's for sure. Whether the show, hit a chord of commerciality and pop culture and like that is something that I would suspect is part of it, but the chemistry was definitely important.
And as a director, I would assume that you're also hyper attuned, if you will, to chemistry between various actors on various projects. Now, how do we define that? I know what it's like with David Cohen, my partner, who's not here today, but on the air we have a chemistry in that you kind of get along. You have this intangible where you're not going to get offended by what the other person says, and you enjoy being with that person. Things of that nature. Is that the same with respect to acting? Like, how do we define that intangible of chemistry that you had with David Soul?
Well, there's always an intangible, no matter how you try to define it, because that's chemistry. That's right. Something people would love to catch on a bottle, but they can't define it. As far as in acting, they say that the most important thing to do is to talk and listen, to be able to talk and listen. And if two characters are doing that from their hearts, then that creates an awful lot of symbiosis. Creates a lot of a big connection.
Right.
And it was an imperative that for David and I that whoever came on the show, we had that kind of relationship. We had a relationship which would be realistic and would be inclusive.
Now, on that show, with respect to chemistry and getting along, did it lend itself in any way, shape, or form, especially in the later seasons, to some kind of ad-libbing or the actors adding quips and a line here and there, or was it strictly stick to what's the written word on the page?
David and I never stuck to the written word.
Let's see that. You can tell that.
We had a good time with that. We would improvise and have a good time with it.
So I think you could tell that a little bit while listening and watching the show, because again, it just seemed to be so natural. Especially later on, you got a little more comedy, if you will, into the show, or at least more comfortable, and that must have stemmed from what we're talking about here, the chemistry and the ad-libbing. No?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, because in the second season also, or after the second season, I believe, pretty much it seems like, from your input, I would say, in the series, that it got a little less violent and more focused on the relationship of the characters. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, well, we were always on the case of the network and the producers to, as I mentioned before, to try to take some responsibility for this violence. That there was an emotional price that one pays for shooting somebody and for being shot, and you just don't want to exploit the violence for its own sake, for titillation. Unfortunately, that was just kind of a sticking point for them. There was one episode where, when we realized they weren't going to come along, we had the scene where we were rescuing somebody and from like a high castle or some place, and I said to David, you carry the guy out, give me your rifle. We both had automatic rifles. I said, you carry the guy, let me have the rifles. I'll step into the hallway and give us cover fire. We had a camera in the hallway, and so on action, I stepped out there and with both guns, and I unloaded both clips just completely. In fact, well, if you want violence,
Right.
folks, here.
Double-barreled, here we go, right?
Yeah, here we go.
Especially back then, it seems like in the 70s, a lot of the shows were really focused on that a lot, and I guess it's for the suits, so to speak. It's a formula, and gee, that's what we'd do every episode because we think that that's what the people like. But I think that the people enjoyed the Starsky and Hutch because of the acting, the camaraderie, the fun nature between the scenes and between all the chases that carried the show between you and David Soul. So we'll continue this discussion on Everything Old is New again right after this. Come on back in 2 minutes, and we'll continue talking all things Starsky Hutch and more with Paul Michael Glaser. We want to talk about his book, The Edge of Whimsy. If you want to take a look at that in advance, go to pmglazerart.com. We'll be back right after this. And Everything Old is New again.
Now, back to America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Everything Old is New again with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
In the year 2017, an innocent man accused of a crime has a choice: hard time or prime time.
Sensational. Perfect contestant. I want him.
He must pay or play the running man.
On your mark.
I'll be back.
Welcome back to Everything Old is New again. That was a little clip from The Running Man from 1987. Arnold Schwarzenegger and Richard Dawson, who were both directed by our guest, Paul Michael Glaser. Now, I know, Mr. Glaser, that you earned a master's degree in fine arts from Boston University in acting and directing in 1967. So my question is, does that give you, or did it give you confidence to push, of course, to act, but then later on to direct episodes of Starsky and Hutch in the third season, and then you directed Miami Vice, Judging Amy, The Agency, Las Vegas with James Caan, among others as well, as long as, of course, The Running Man and Kazam with Shaquille O'Neal. So the question is, with respect to acting and directing, if someone was looking to get into those fields today, what would you suggest? I mean, it doesn't seem to be a straight path to doing that and to success in that. So maybe someone of your stature would be able to lend our audience, if they've got a child or themselves sort of interested in theater, what would be the suggestion with respect to that light in their eye and how to follow that dream?
Well, we unfortunately have this need as people to draw a straight line, to think, well, if I do A and B and C, I'll get to D. I tell young people who are starting out or have been in the business a while that each journey is its own journey, and everybody comes to it a different way. And it's how well you acquit yourself in terms of learning the craft and applying it that determines, whether or not you're going to be able to deliver when luck raises its head. Because one has to understand that as much as we want to think that we are the cause of things, it's a lot of luck, and there's a lot of, and so the key is to be prepared when that happens. I discovered when I did Starsky and Hutch that theater was really the actor's medium. The theater was, the curtain goes up, it's you in the audience, and no one's going to interrupt you, and you'll cut. And that film was the director's medium, and television is the producer's medium. Because television is primarily to sell soap. That's what it functions as, even though it's masquerading a lot now as theater.
Right.
The thing about television that people don't seem to understand is that a close-up in television, the size of the head is no bigger than your head or my head. It's not larger than life.
Right.
And the tradition of the theater and the tradition of cinema has always been that you sit back and you'd be looking at a big, 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 big wide screen, and the characters would all be larger than life, because our heroes are all larger than life. They have to have a heroic component of being able to deal with their fear, and they have to have a human component, which is the same thing. So when I realized that was what television or filmmaking was about, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. So when the show resumed the second year, I asked that they write David like 80%, 70%, and write me 30%, because I wanted to concentrate on directing. They of course said that he'd become the star of the show, and I said, well, that's fine, but I want to concentrate on directing. So then when I finished the show, I basically, because Hollywood and the whole world, if you become successful at one thing, people tend to stick you in that pigeonhole.
Right.
And so it took about 10 years of not acting to get people to believe that I really wanted to direct and like that. So that was one route. There are people that are editors that become directors. I once taught a graduate class in directing, and at the first class, I asked the students. I said, "Who here feels that they absolutely have to? They are compelled to direct. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is what they're passionate about." As opposed to it being, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time, or I'd sure like to find out what it's like.
Right.
And that's an important component. By the way, only one person raised their hand, and that person and I got into some really good arguments, but I have to applaud that person was committed and was absolutely compelled to realize a directing career. But you can come to directing as a writer, you can come to it as an editor, you can come to it as an actor, you can come to it many, many, many different ways. And the key in directing is there are so many disciplines. There are some directors that have a good visual sense, some directors have a good dramatic sense in terms of writing. Some directors can move a camera and have a good photographic sense. Some directors have good problem solving. In television, when you direct, you're moving so fast that problem solving becomes a key issue, which is one of the things that stood me in very good stead when I did Running Man, because after having turned the film down, when they went into production, they fired the director and came back to me and asked me if I would take it over, which I decided to do. And my problem-solving ability was a strong factor in being able to get that film to the can.
See that? It sounds like from that lengthy and informative answer that a couple of elements. One is the drive, the inspiration, that thing that's inside of you that's telling you what you want to and need to do, and of course being prepared and have the skills to do that. But pick something that's making you, that's carrying your thoughts for the day. Like I started this radio show, 6 years ago, and I'm in my 50s, so I had a whole career as an attorney ahead of time or before that, but this dream never ended, so I continued to do what I can to pursue and not close the door, along the line to get this show off the ground. Then, you just have that. If it's just something that's driving you, is what I think you're saying, is it's going to propel you to try to be there when, as you say, that opportunity is there, and also to ensure that you're prepared for that opportunity. Speaking of... Go ahead. I'm sorry. I think
it's important to understand that right now we live in a world where we are constantly being told if you do A, it'll lead to B. We're always impressed by that, and so we're always looking for the best path, the best way to go. And the reality is, because you have so little control over fate and circumstance, the only thing you can do is be true to yourself, be true to your passion, be true to your heart. It will lead you in the right direction. There is nothing that ensures success. Success is not something that, as much as we want to believe that we're capable of making happen, you can't make it happen. You can only apply yourself as specifically as possible to the task at hand and hope that connects with people.
Right, and sometimes the success itself or the journey itself is the success, if you will, because not everybody's going to be able to achieve center field for the New York Yankees, so to speak, But getting there sometimes is fighting to get there is a test of your mettle and a success story unto itself. And we're speaking.
The saying something that's very, very true. Process is everything. The journey or the process is all you have. At the end of the day, whether it made something else happen, that's beyond your control. But what you can do is you can stay in the process and stay true to what you're trying to do, and you'll at least come away with that. So it's a win-win. When you let an idea of making something happen take over, then that works against you because it defeats your ability. Going back to the acting, to talk and listen to people and to yourself and like that.
Right, distracts you from what you're actually seeking to do. So I do.
That's right, because success, people don't understand it as much as they might, and it's something that's really born out of our culture, and that is that the hardest thing to deal with is success. The easiest thing to deal with, or easier thing to deal with, is failure. Because in failure, that's my dog. When failure happens, you stand to learn and to grow. When success happens, you start to believe that it was something that you did that caused the success, and then you spend all your time trying to recreate it.
Right, or thinking that you were the only thing responsible for the success, and you can kind of lose your way that way, too. So that makes sense, and I appreciate that discussion. We're going to return with Paul Michael Glaser and talk about Crystallian and the Source of Light, as well as The Edge of Whimsy. Christmas is coming up, and these are two tremendous books that I would suggest would be something to take a look at for the holiday list, if you will, and they're all both on Amazon, and certainly you can go to the website of pmglazerart.com. We'll be back right after this on Everything Old's New Again.
You're listening to Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
Hey, man, I'm telling you, it's a steal at $5,000.
$5,000 for what? Think I want to ride around in a blueberry on wheels?
This is not a blueberry on wheels. I apologize for my partner's rudeness. This happens to be a piece of sculpture.
Yeah, it's a piece of sculpture. It's a piece of...
Piece of what? What's the matter with you, man? You bad-mouthing my short.
Merle, now here's a car with some character to it. It's got some soul, some dignity, some inner flash.
Lousy spark plug.
Back on Everything Old is New Again, and we're having some fun with Paul Michael Glaser from Starsky and Hutch. That's just a little piece of the example of the chemistry between David Soul and Paul Michael Glaser in the 70s hit Starsky and Hutch. I want to turn the page in our discussion to a piece of artwork that Mr. Glaser has gotten involved with. Two things. Number one, The Edge of Whimsy, which we'll talk about in a moment. But first, there's Crystallia and the Source of Light, which is available on Amazon. I'm just saying that right off the bat because it's a holiday season, and I think this would make a great gift. Paul, tell us a little bit about this book.
Well, I wrote it first as a screenplay about 17 years ago. And at the time, they didn't have the technology they do now to animate the properties of light. So I decided to write it as a book. And what I realized while I was writing it was I was trying to find a way to share with people what I've learned in my life and in my journey. I had experienced a fair amount of loss and helplessness and everything like that. But I didn't want to do it in a boring or a beachy way. I wanted to make it entertaining. So I chose to write in the Alice in Wonderland genre, you know, one of those wonderful stories that we all grew up with as kids, you know, with all those archetypal characters that are so much fun. And so I wrote a story. The story is about a 14-year-old girl. It's told in her voice, and her 9-year-old brother. It's their last Christmas with the mom, who unfortunately is not well, and it's the last Christmas in their house because the bank is kicking them out. And the girl is angry and bitter and has no faith in anything except what she can see and touch. And on Christmas Eve, the boy and the girl find themselves on a journey through an underground medieval kingdom where everything and everybody are made of minerals and crystals in search of the source of light. I wrote it from the child in me to the child in all of us.
Now,
it gets marketed. Let me just say one more thing. It gets marketed as a young adult's book on Amazon. However, it's really meant for the whole family in the best of all worlds to take down from the shelf at Christmas and read aloud to and with each other. And to that end, all the characters in that underground world speak with different accents. And I phoneticize the accents so that when you read it out loud, you end up speaking with those accents.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, and you know, it's a very entertaining and a very moving story that actually has some really, really interesting lessons in it. For instance, what is the purpose of fear in our lives, which is an opening to a whole treatise on my particular philosophy that I've learned in the way I conduct myself now.
I'll tell you, that's a great market, so to speak, a great area of entertainment that we at my house, I have a 10 and a 7-year-old, and we just recently went to, they call it Nerd Camp around the corner in the school around the corner. They had 65 authors come. It's the only school that I know of that does this around. And they're authors like yourself that have produced works for, whether it be for the family, whether it be for the child alone, and the child got a chance to meet, my kids got a chance to meet the authors, get the pitch on the book, maybe buy the book, get an autograph, talk to the authors, and it really inspired them to read. So I think that this discussion on the radio of this book, if you really think about it, these children's books, and I'm using that in quotes, are not always for children. I've read some of these books with my children in the past, and I'm planning to get the Crystalia and the Source of Light for Christmas. And what a great idea to just sit around, put these cell phones away and all this technology and what have you, and have a great family night, or a couple of nights, if you will, reading this book and going through this adventure with your kids together. Believe me, I think, number one, it will certainly inspire your kids to read more, but two, it sounds like there's a lot of interesting and substantial lessons along with the fun. I mean, I think the reading and having the accents could be the fun part of it, dad doing this accent and another kid doing another one, but besides that, the fun of the story. But again, like you said, I love the idea that there are lessons and life lessons in this book as well. I think that's what a great way to go, and a great couple of nights to spend around the fire reading this book. How long a book is it? How could you do this in a couple of nights with the kids, or how long do you think it would take?
No, it's not going to be a couple of nights. It's just under 300 pages.
Good. So it could be like a thing that you do for a month or two. That's the most memorable times I've had, is when I've been reading before going to bed a chapter a night to the kids, and it takes a while, but it becomes quite the memory. And maybe in this way would be a tradition, start to read this book maybe around Thanksgiving in the future for the holidays, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. I mean, that's the way I intended it. It's also a book that, while you're having a lot of fun and it's very entertaining, there's plenty to talk about, and plenty for kids to talk about. The interesting thing, when I mentioned a moment ago about one of the questions that it purports to answer is what is the purpose of fear in our lives? It's interesting to me how many adults, there are plenty of adults that like it, but there are also a lot of adults that that don't get it. I know that when I was a kid, and you know when you were a kid, fear, the monster, the boogeyman, was under your bed. It was right in your closet. It was right there. It was tangible. It was something very real. Then it became socially unacceptable to show that you were scared or that you had any fear, and so fear became known as, that famous expression, there's only one thing we have to fear, and that's fear itself. Fear is actually really not only a reality in our lives, but it can be an incredible fuel. It can be a credible tool to access our hearts and our compassion and our ability to love.
It's sort of like, let's remember, fear, the most basic, is going to motivate you to run out of that room, so to speak, that the monster's in, or attack the monster and resolve that problem. One way or the other, fear, it will, like you just said, ignite some form of action. Let's take that action and make it a positive action for ourselves, and not have the action be to curl up in a ball, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can give it to you in a nutshell, and I don't know how clear it will be, but in my reckoning, there's only one fear, and that's helpless. That's the granddaddy of all fears. Helpless to know, helpless to do, helpless to function, helpless to affect the well-being of a loved one who's sick or dying, helpless to get out of a traffic jam when you're late for an appointment. There are many, many different levels of helpless. The concept of helplessness is an anathema to our mind, because the mind identifies itself by what it can do, and it doesn't want to hear or deal with what it can't do, what it is helpless to do. So the mind employs a thing called denial, and we suppress all of these feelings. But when we can acknowledge that it's helplessness that we're scared of, then we have the ability to make a choice and not be helpless. We can pat ourselves on the shoulder, and we can say, good for you for carrying on in the face of this fear. And we find some compassion for ourselves, and by extension, compassion for other people. From my reckoning, the purpose of fear is to awaken us, to remind us that we have the capacity to be able to have compassion for ourselves in our fear, and to love ourselves. And so the purpose of fear is to find our capacity for love.
And that's couldn't be more well said by Paul Michael Glaser here, the author of Crystalia and the Source of Light. I'm assuming Crystalia is the young girl, or is that something else?
No, Crystalia is the name of the kingdom.
Ah, okay, there we go. Just trying to get our audience to be able to remember that. Crystalia and the Source of Light on Amazon.com.
Yeah, they take a journey through into Crystalia. They end up taking a journey to the land of Fossilia, which is the land of fossils, and the land of magma. Down there, their god is Metamorphosis, the Wizard of Iz, and he's protected in the land of magma by Igneous the Nth.
It sounds like they're going to learn some good vocabulary and some good science along the way as well, right?
Yeah, you'll learn a lot. I mean, if you've ever been to a natural history museum and watched families come into the room with the crystals and the minerals and see the expressions on everybody's face, the adults, the children, because what we don't realize is that any color, any hue, any design, any shape or form that you could possibly make up in your mind already exists underground. It's the other half of our lives. It's why we are alive. There's that aspect of the book also, is that it takes you into a world that we really know very little about.
It's got to get on your Amazon.com list, your Christmas list. Everyone has got to take a look at Crystalia and the Source of Light. What a great, great gift for the niece, the nephew, the daughter, the family to get involved with a great book that's going to teach lessons, that's maybe be something that becomes a holiday tradition that was started right here on Everything Old is New Again with Paul Michael Glaser. We'll be back right after this and continue one more section. We'll have some great times with Paul Michael Glaser on Everything Old is New Again.
This is Everything Old is New Again, America's entertainment pop culture talk show with Douglas Viviani and David Cohen.
I just want to get out of here.
Scared of the woods?
I want to split.
And I want to stay.
Suddenly I feel liberated.
Don't push it.
No, I feel alive and woodsy, one with nature. Yeah, little rocks, little barks, little wildflowers, little chipmunks, little beavers. What was that? I don't know. There have been some sightings of grizzlies around here.
You mean bears?
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's get rolling then.
Here we go. We're rolling here with Paul Michael Glaser from Everything Old is New Again. That was a little piece of Starsky and Hutch, and showing again the chemistry between the actors David Soul and Paul Michael Glaser. But Paul Michael Glaser is more than an actor, so to speak. It's interesting. He's directed so much, and now he has written Talia and the Source of Light, which we spoke about last section of our show. And in addition, he's turned himself to the world of art as well, with a book called The Edge of Whimsy. I'm just going to read you one quote here, and let's see if we can get an explanation and amplification of this quote from the author Paul Michael Glaser. I enjoyed inhabiting contradiction and irony, sometimes humorous, sometimes painful, each conflicting with while illuminating the other. To experience both, for me, is the edge of whimsy. Paul Michael Glaser, how about that?
How about that?
Is that a quote from you that you could amplify a little bit and explain, at the very least, what are we looking at when we get into the edge of whimsy and all the artwork that's illuminated in this book?
Well, I was looking for an illustrator for my second book, which I'm finishing up right now, and my daughter said, "Dad, you should illustrate it." So I was on my way over to England to do a tour of Fiddler on the Roof. I was playing Tevye. And so I took my sketch pad with me, and I started sketching illustrations. And when I got bored with those, I did other sketches. And then when I finished the tour, I had this mountain of unfinished work. But I discovered how much I liked doing something that I could disappear for 6 to 8 hours a day. That was the good news. The bad news was I discovered that I could do something that I could disappear for 6 to 8 hours a day.
Right.
So, anyways, when I finished that block of work, then I returned to the illustrations, which I'm finishing up right now. And in that block of work, all seemed to share one thing in common. And my son and I started putting this book together because I decided to include some of my poetry and some of my writing, little essays and stuff like that, between the pieces of art. Because even with Starsky, I would have to say that there was a fair amount of whimsy in the way I approached the role. My attitude as an actor was, I don't know how to be a cop. I got to beat up this guy who's 2 feet taller than me.
Right.
How do I do that? So we created this book, The Edge of Whimsy, and there's only one poem I remember from it, and it's the lightest, most frivolous of all the poems, but it's a lot of fun. It goes, "I hear you, buzzing and bumping against the glass, trying from inside out to pass. If you think you're annoyed, I'm not overjoyed at the prospect of plastering your ass."
If you remember the punchline, I guess you can remember the rest of the poem, right? That gives you
yeah, I suppose.
A piece of it. And you'll find that, as well as, though, pencil and charcoal drawings, digital works, painted sketches. It's a wide variety of artwork in there. So my first question about that is, do you have a favorite, and or why do you do, or how did you, get involved with all these different types of art?
Well, the first off, when I went over to England to do this tour of Fiddler, I wasn't about to take a paintbrush and all that stuff. So I took my iPad and I photographed the sketches, and then I started messing around with coloring them. And then, erroneously, I actually believed at one point that my learning curve on Photoshop, which is the platform I work on, my learning curve on Photoshop would be less severe than learning to paint with acrylics and oils and stuff like that. So that's how I got into the digital aspect. And then I started, and then I took a look at these sketches I was working on. I said, well, I don't want to just paint them, make them into paintings. What can I do? And I discovered that there was a very interesting relationship between the electronic color of Photoshop and the graphite stroke of the pencil. There's a certain synergy that happened there. And so I started messing around with some drawings and adding color to them and stuff like that. And other pieces I would just paint outright. I have a lot of styles because I don't really understand and never understood this concept of you got to find one style or two styles and stay with it. Because style is dictated by the subject matter. It's not dictated by, I'm going to cram it into this preconceived kind of execution, kind of painting or drawing or whatever. And so before I knew it, when I gave myself a license to explore all these styles, before I knew it, I had, as you said, I've created a bunch of styles. You know, some of them are sculptural, some of them are painterly, some of them are sketches, painted sketches. But they all shared this one thing in common, which was this sense of whimsy. Even serious subjects, you know, have that sense of whimsy. You know, trying to understand the frailty, the humor in the frailty of the human condition.
And that's where, you know, was some of the success of Starsky and Hutch, of course. You put a smile on someone's face. Even in, you know, serious movies, The Godfather, let's say, you know, it's get the cannolis after they just murder someone. I mean, there's always that little bit of a, you know, it is part of our life, the whimsy, and it makes things a little more fun to look at. And if you look at this book, it is a fun book to look at, and you could look at a page of artwork for a half hour and get different things out of the same piece of artwork, then turn the page and look at it for 3 minutes and then move on to the next. It just, there's so much there, so much variety. It's a great, I hate to say coffee table book because it's more than that. It's really, it's a hefty work of art. Go to PM, of course, Paul Michael, PM Glaser, Glaser, PM Glaser Art.com. You'll find a lot more information about the edge of whimsy. I think it's interesting that you say that, and have said it a number of times, that to be pigeonholed and to do one thing and think that that's what we're here on the planet for, is the Jews, just do that one thing. Maybe there are people for that, and maybe that's true, but I'm sure, because I agree with you, there's more than one thing in life that we can excel at as we achieve one thing maybe and look to the next. We have these different drives inside of us, especially if we listen to our artistic side. I've got a 7-year-old we send to, believe it or not, this summer I wanted him to do baseball and football camps and tennis and whatever and all this stuff, and he gravitated to, and I listened to what he was saying, so he gravitated to the art. So he ended up, instead of, you know, all these other camps, you know, we have individual camps you can go to for a week, he did like 8 weeks of art camping. So what? He loved it because it had so much variety. He did the sculptures a little bit. He did, you know, watercolors, and then he did all this stuff that we have. And listen, he may or may not have the talent of it, but why should we pigeonhole ourselves into one thing? You're an attorney, you're an actor, and period. That's it. There's more to life than that, and we're learning that you have a lot to you, which I love to see, all the layers, with the book Crystalia and the Source of Light on Amazon. We've spoke about that, but if you didn't hear, that's a great Christmas gift. Look that up on Amazon.com. Again, we're talking about the edge of whimsy, PMGlaserArt.com with Paul Michael Glaser. In the closing minutes, it just wanted to see, is there anything else that we didn't touch upon yet? We throw the mic open to you. We have about a minute and a half, if you like, to just let us know what else is happening in your life, and or to thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. You had asked before about the Pediatric AIDS, the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, which I became the chairman of the board for about 6 years. Stepped down a while back. My son Jake is now very active in the organization, and they're doing amazing work all over the world. They, have a huge amount of work they do in Africa and in Asia. Try to educate people about this drug nevirapine, which interrupts the transmission of the virus from mother to child in the third trimester of a pregnancy. And that is having a significant impact on the spread of AIDS. Elizabeth created a foundation which was amazing in so many ways, and I came on to try to help preserve that work and keep it moving forward.
And if you want to find out more information about that, it's PEDAIDS, AIDS, PEDAIDS.org. And I hate to cut you short, but we're running short on time on our show here. But we have great information you can see there in the progress that's been made through this foundation, through the work of this foundation, from when it started to when where you are now and we are now. I believe, I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but there's a huge increase in the ability to fight AIDS in children as a result of the efforts of the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. So go to PEDAIDS.org to find out more information. Of course, Crystallian, The Source of Light on Amazon, and The Edge of Whimsy, PMGlaserArt.com. I gave you a lot of information there. Hopefully you're listening with a pen and a paper here on Everything Old is New Again. Paul Michael Glaser, thank you so much for spending so much time with us here. We had a great time. We look forward to having you back someday.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you. And keep on listening to Everything Old is New Again for your greatest and best in America's entertainment pop culture. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.